Hello and welcome back to the Listening Lounge. My name is Nick Day, CEO of 𝐥𝐢𝐤 Recruitment, specialist payroll and HR recruiters. And today I am bringing you a world-renowned guest. Mr. Stephen M.R. Covey is going to join me today on the show. And let's be honest, right now there is so much noise on the internet, it can be really hard to be heard. So I want you all to take an opportunity today just to listen, relax, and try and learn something new, because they say the quieter we are, the more we hear, and that listening is the secret to discovering the greatest of stories. Well, for those not familiar, Stephen M.R. Covey is a New York Times bestseller, a #1 Wall Street Journal bestselling author of his book, The Speed of Trust. Something we're going to talk about a little bit more today. It's been translated into over 22 languages. It's sold over 2 million copies worldwide. A Harvard MBA, Stephen co-founded and currently leads Franklin Covey's Global Speed of Trust practice. He serves on numerous boards. He's a hugely sought after international speaker. So just leaves me to say a huge and exciting welcome to Stephen M.R. Covey to the Listening Lounge show. How are you feeling today?
Guitars right behind you.
I know, well, I'll be honest, I display them much better than I play them.
Hi, Nick. Hey, I'm feeling fantastic. Excited to be on this podcast, and especially to have this conversation with you. So really delighted. Thank you for this opportunity.
I feel totally honored. And those listeners that have been with me before will already be familiar, of course, with Stephen Covey's work and Franklin Covey's work, because we featured it before. But we're here today to talk about a subject of trust. Right now, particularly as we come through, hopefully, this pandemic, trust has really been an element that organizations have had to come to terms with very quickly, with new ways of working from home and things like that. And organizations now are really trying to maintain engagement, maintain relevancy, stay ahead of the technological curve. With this in mind, I would love to know, is trust a learnable skill or is it inherent?
And that's a great question, because it's really foundational to all of my work, but really to any HR professional.
Sure.
The whole idea that can you intentionally build trust in the culture or on a team? And in my short answer is that trust is in fact a learnable skill.
Okay, I'm playing a little bit of devil's advocate with you, Stephen, because I get what you're saying. That makes total sense to me. Of course, I'm not second guessing my teams or my departments. If I'm not checking work, if I'm letting them run with things are always going to be quicker. And that's great. But sometimes you just have teams of individuals where you struggle to have that trust, even though you know that having it is beneficial, but it's not there. And we know it now, it can be learned. What are some of the initiatives HR leaders can implement? What can teams do or leaders do to really build that trust if it isn't currently in play at the moment? What do you sort of, and in addition to that, what do you see as the things really impacting on trust working successfully?
Well, here's the first thing. If you can focus on making the creation of trust an explicit objective, just like you have other objectives like, sure, gaining market share, increasing profit, increasing the speed of in the sales cycle, what have you. If you could also create as an objective to build trust. Most people never thought of that as being a tangible thing.
I never have, to be honest, never have. Yeah.
But trust is learnable. And that also trust is measurable. You can measure it and you can move the needle on it. And, because trust is a perception, you can measure perceptions and you can move from low to medium and medium to high trust. You can get good at this. Second thing is, if you can then help people see that you build trust through your credibility and through your behavior. So if you can lead out and model first and give to your team a leader that they can trust, a model that they can trust, so people can look at you and say, oh, that's what you mean. You're that kind of leader. In other words, you don't point the finger and say, you're the problem, but you rather say, hey, here's how you build trust. You model it. And you model it as a leader, you model it on your team, you model it as your team works with other teams. So people can see a model of doing this. And then when people don't build trust and they're not good at building trust, I've also learned this: always make sure you separate the person from their behavior.
To bring it back to an organizational level, there's a chapter in your book which talks about how families are organizations too. And I love that, because I mentioned earlier that, I think about trust a lot in my personal life, and I don't always reference it in my business life, but I absolutely believe that of my organization that I run certainly is a family. We've worked with each other for a long time. There's certainly a lot of trust between ourselves, and actually we spend more time at work than we do with our loved ones at home. So when you talk about in your chapter, you talk about before going into the behavioral elements which you just mentioned, you say you ask every company 4 key questions, and usually it ends up with an aha moment after you've asked them. I'll read the 4 questions in just a moment, but I wondered if you could tell us why in particular these are the 4 questions that really brought those aha moments. If you can give us any examples. So the questions are, how do you describe a low trust organization? How do you describe a high trust organization? Which description best represents your organization, and what are the results? And of course, all of this is available in the book if people want to read more. But why are those 4 questions so poignant? And tell us a bit more about some of those aha moments that you've experienced.
The reason I think that these questions are relevant is that it kind of helps us make trust tangible and understandable. In other words, we're all experts on trust in a sense, because we have relationships.
Sure.
We're on teams, we're in organizations, even if it's like you say, in your family or in the community. And we all can kind of look at how are things done here. And you look at the observable behaviors, the actions, and you can see whether or not there's behaviors that will build the trust, or if there's behaviors everywhere they're going to destroy it. So when you're seeing everywhere people pointing the finger, blaming other people, the blame game going on, or people spinning or twisting, manipulating, posturing, or when you see people talking behind other people's backs or gossiping, or when you see people operating with hidden agendas, or where you see people really not listening to understand, but just kind of efficiently trying to go through the motions, or people overpromise and underdeliver, a whole bunch of different behaviors. When you see those kind of behaviors going on in the culture on the team, almost without even needing to do a trust assessment, you can almost know that's a low trust culture, low trust team. I can walk into a team and within a few hours, give you a sense of the level of trust on the team by just observing the behaviors. The flip side is true as well. When you see people talking straight, and when they're open, when they're transparent, when they're listening first, when they're seeking clarity and understanding, when they're declaring their intent, when they're taking responsibility and owning things, and when they're righting the wrong, when they speak about people as if they were present,
nice.
and when they make and keep commitments, and when I see people extending trust to others, I can just almost walk in and within again a few hours or a day or two, be able to say, you know what, this is a high trust team and culture, and you can measure it if you want, very scientifically. But almost all of us can see it. And then if you can look at the results that flow from either high trust or low trust, and the differences, the contrast that can be night and day different, and recognize, my goodness, this is not just a soft social virtue. It is economic. It's impacting everything that we're trying to do, including our ability to collaborate and to innovate and to engage our people, but also it affects our results and our outcomes in terms of the economic performance. And it also affects the energy and the joy. I imagine that most people listening to this podcast are already saying, I've got high self-trust, but it remains the common denominator of the starting point for all of us. Always look in the mirror, always start with yourself, your credibility, your behavior. You do that well, and you will be the catalyst to create trust from the inside out. You will be that model who becomes the mentor, and you will be the ripple in the pond, and you'll build that trust from the inside out. That is the charge, that is the challenge to each and every one of us, to get better, to become a catalyst for building high trust in a low trust world. We can do this. We need to bring about a renaissance of trust, Nick. There's too much distrust in our world, and we've got to bring about this renaissance of trust. And I challenge all of us, starting with you and I, Nick, and all our listeners and viewers on this podcast, to be a catalyst to bring about a renaissance of trust. It's what's needed today.
Just leaves me to say a huge thank you to Stephen M.R. Covey for joining me today on the Listening Lounge. Of course, if you haven't grabbed a copy of the Speed of Trust book yet, please do so. It's an amazing read. There's so much fantastic insight in this book. I cannot recommend it highly enough. And remember, every good conversation starts with good listening. Thanks again. I'll speak to you all real soon.